I'm tired.
Hello, everyone. You're listening to the Late Morning Program with Namras Podcast, the number one Hare Krishna podcast in the world. I'm here with Siddhanta Prabhu. Siddhanta Prabhu, thank you for joining me.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for the opportunity to share some Srila Prabhupada nectar. I hope.
So for those of you who don't know, Siddhanta Prabhu is the creator, the producer of Prabhupada Memories. Now, a lot of us grew up with Srila Prabhupada's memories on VHS and on DVD and now on YouTube. So a lot of my friends who I spoke to about this episode, they said, we didn't even know that Siddhanta Prabhu was behind this all. So they're super interested in hearing what you have to say about how you came to this idea, how it's been going, what's the future of it, and all kinds of things like that, as well as your own personal story, which is also very interesting. So, Prabhu, maybe we could start out there. Tell us a little bit about how you came in contact with Srila Prabhupada and ISKCON.
Well, it goes back many years. This life began over 73 years ago.
Wow.
when I was born in St. Louis, Missouri at a very young age. And just seeing if you're listening.
I picked up on that.
Okay. Thank you. But I was raised mostly in Los Angeles, and nice parents, raised in a nice family, in a nice home. My father was a child analyst, child psychiatrist.
Oh, interesting.
And there's the rumor going around that the sons of child psychiatrists are the craziest. And I think I can attest to that. Without finding Prabhupada, who knows what could have happened to me.
Right.
So I thank Prabhupada for that. But so I was educated there, and then I went to college at the University of Oregon.
Oh, okay.
And I graduated with a BA, Bachelor's of Arts in Business Administration, and majored in marketing. But what happened was that when you're a senior and you're about to graduate, all these headhunters come at the university and try to entice you to sign up and join their company.
Right.
And somehow or another, the focus of the marketing department was we were getting headhunters from people that like Del Monte Foods and different food manufacturers for some reason. Then they wanted you to end up as a stock boy at Safeway or something. And that wasn't very appealing to me.
Right.
So, but during my senior year, I was into filmmaking, just doing student films on a little Super 8 movie,
Wow.
really thin, small film stock. So that's what I wanted to do. I don't know why, but I enjoyed it, doing it, and my time passed away. I was doing that more than I was studying for the final exams, it seemed. So when I graduated, went back to LA and tried to get into the film industry there. But it was very difficult because the unions are very strong there. I did have some friends whose parents were in the film industry, but even they, were not able to, just kind of like, wrangle me in there just because I knew them.
Right.
So for a year or so, I graduated in 1969. So about the next year, I spent time in odd jobs. And one day I was downtown, and I think I was selling wigs. That was paying the rent at that time.
Wow.
Which was not very inspiring. But while I was downtown doing that, I saw a Harinam party.
Right.
First contact with Hare Krishna devotees. Knew nothing about it. Like they were like Martians falling out of the sky.
Right.
That's what I thought. And my reaction was not really a strange one, because I've come in contact with people that knew nothing about what Krishna consciousness was all about. Yeah. And their reaction was similar to mine, but mine was like, I was criticizing. I said, what are those guys doing over there? Right. That's nonsense. That's ridiculous. And I think there was a policeman standing next to me, and I said, what are those guys doing? So I was like a really demonic attitude. And there you can see, actually, I sent along this picture from the Bhagavad Gita, which a painting that describes the demonic natures. And that's me there pointing to the devotees. And when I saw this, that was, I don't know, in the last life or something, I was an Indian criticizing the Harinam party.
Right.
But that was my nature, and somehow or another, with reading Prabhupada's books, finally I realized, well, there was something behind them chanting, and I understood it. But it's interesting, the devotee leading that Harinam party is a redheaded, really bright redheaded fellow. And his name that I found out later was Mohanananda.
Oh, okay.
And he was a dear disciple, close associate of Prabhupada. When I moved to, and then, so anyway, I couldn't find a job there. So I branched out and looked into other avenues, other areas that might hire somebody without joining a union, where you'd have to work for 15, 20 years before you can actually rise up to the level of actually putting your hands on a piece of film and cutting.
Right.
So I went to Dallas, Texas, shortly thereafter, 1971, and I got a job. I just went in, they hired me. It was Krishna's mercy, and I became a film editor.
Now you had not you had just seen devotees at that
Just seen
time,
them.
and then you didn't see them again, but then you went to Dallas.
Yeah, it was a one-day account, 15-minute encounter of seeing them chanting on the streets of Hollywood.
Wow.
And then went to Dallas, and got a film job, worked there, cutting commercials and feature films and documentaries, various projects. But one day in the summertime, it was the summertime, I remember that was a bright sunny day, there was a park where myself and my wife at that time would go, and it was hippie. We were hippies.
Right.
And there were the devotees there chanting, and they were also distributing BTGs, Back to Godhead magazines. And I said, okay, let me take one. I gave them a donation. I think I did. I don't know. But I got the magazine. And at that time, my wife and I were really, we were on a journey. We were like inquisitive about philosophical things. So we were into Nishin Shoshu Buddhism, macrobiotics, yoga. I was raised in the Jewish faith, but I didn't, get enough really satisfying intellectual knowledge about God just to say that, oh, he's there. And he's like, the old man with a white beard concept that
right.
Jewish and Christian, I think people generally have about God. He's the oldest man, so he must look old.
Right.
But anyway, I read this BTG and went home and read it. And it was the first article I read. It was an article by Prabhupada. Answered every question I ever had in this one article, plus more. And it was like, I didn't even have a question to this answer. And it's an amazing comment, a statement about karma, reincarnation, that answered to me internal questions that I had. My father couldn't answer. He was basically an atheist. And I couldn't get it when I took a philosophical course at the University of Oregon. They didn't address things that were not haunting me, but I wanted to know about. Then this one article answered that. So then I went to the temple and got more association there. The temple there in Dallas was in a community called Highland Park, and it was a suburb of Dallas, a rich area. And they had a house there. This was before they moved into the temple on Gurley Avenue. That's currently the temple for ISKCON in Dallas. And it was a 2-story house, very nice house. There were maybe 8, 10 devotees there, maybe 8 or 10 men, and maybe 6 women. Very small temple. But who's the president of the Dallas temple when I joined there? Mohanananda.
What?
The guy with the red hair.
Oh my goodness.
Who was leading that party on Hollywood Boulevard that I first saw. So, I mean,
wow.
Who knew,
That's outrageous.
But, yeah. And then I have another story about Mohanananda.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're kind of getting off tracks here.
No, that's fine. I love to hear that.
Okay. But it's kind of like a small world story.
Yeah.
Mohanananda, very devotional person, and very intelligent. He helped Prabhupada in Bombay and tried to get donations from Indian life members there to build a temple in Juhu. And
Right.
he since has gone on to be a famous producer of movies, and they're now writing a book about him.
Is he still alive?
Yeah, still alive.
Oh, wow.
And he promised me that when he comes to LA, that he would sit down for an interview about his time with Prabhupada.
Oh, wonderful.
But I hadn't seen him in probably, well, 70. He became the headmaster at Gurukula when the devotees moved to Gurley Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
You can see him in Yadavara's film, Vishaka's film, the world, Hare Krishna World, or something like that. There's a shot of him, with his dhoti on, and he's at a desk, and he's looking very official as the headmaster.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So that's him, if you ever want to see what he looks like.
Right.
But I hadn't seen him or come in contact with him. We had my wife and I. We stayed in the temple for maybe a couple of months, and then we blooped. There were some issues that, and I was still a film editor when we moved into the temple there in Turtle Creek is what it was. Okay. So after I left, I went, I was still continued as a film editor at the production company. So I hadn't seen Mohanananda from like 1972 till 2020 that I had lost contact with him. Tried to find him for years, but I never came in contact with him again.
Wow.
But I got an email about 3 or 4 months ago because I had posted on YouTube my first Hare Krishna documentary, where I went, I rented a camera because I was a film editor. I didn't have access to cameras. So there was a double wedding in Dallas that Mohanananda was the officiating priest, and lighting the fire and saying the mantras and giving their blessings and everything. So he was leading that. So I knew that was coming up. Satsvarup was there. And so I rented a camera and I filmed the wedding. And then after the wedding, I went and interviewed it was a double wedding, Prajapati and Sadarupa, Rishabdev, and a girl named Kumkum. Oh. Rishabdev is no longer with us. Kumkum's still active, I think, in Northern California.
Okay.
Great devotees, all 4 of them. Prajapati sadly left us last year. Okay. But anyway, I took my a recorder, just an audio recorder, and interviewed them. This was, I guess, the start of this process of my getting oral histories. But I would interview them and say, well, how did you join Hare Krishna? What did your parents think? What do you enjoy about it? I kind of had a gambit of questions that I asked, and then I used that as the sound bed as we're seeing the wedding going on. Oh, and the audience, and you see the fire being lit. It's very colorful. It's only a 6-minute piece. It's on YouTube if you want to go see it. Right. But I posted that about 6-7 months ago on YouTube for the first time in 30, 40 years, whatever it was, back in 72. And you do the math. And then I get an email from a guy named Roland, who is a client of mine and became a friend of mine. He was a co-owner of a production company here in LA. And they hired me for editing jobs and shooting, etc. They do a lot of their work. They do trailers for movies. And I hadn't seen him in a couple of years, but I've worked for him. I know him for 30 years, but he didn't know I was a devotee, because my general philosophy in business is don't talk about religion or politics. You'll get in trouble. Right. I've it's like, oh my God, did I step in that one, Right. And I'll never see that client again. Right. But I get an email from Roland saying he knows me as Sid Hunter. Right. And he said, Sid, is this you? And he said, how do you know Michael Walker? How do you know Mohanananda? And what were you doing in Dallas in 1972? And I'm going, oh my God. I came out of the closet, at that moment. Right. At least with Roland. Right. And so I said, well, I was there as a film editor and I filmed this documentary and blah, blah, blah. And he said, oh, that's amazing. It's a small world story because I'm personal friends with Mohanananda, and he is producing Mohanananda's autobiography, and he's maybe going to do a movie on his life.
Really?
Before he joined Prabhupada, he was in the family with Timothy Leary, so he has that kind of
Oh,
history
I see.
about his journey. And
Hmm.
then after, I think he left, Prabhupada. He was with Prabhupada in the movement. Maybe in the 80s, he left and then joined or became a film producer, because that was his desire from even before he met Prabhupada, to become involved in producing movies. And
Wow.
one of his famous movies is the Last Unicorn. It's an animated film,
Wow.
children's film.
So he became successful.
Yeah, very successful.
Oh,
So
interesting.
Roland told me about him, and then I said, well, listen, what is his email address? Blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So we've reconnected after 30, 40 years, in
That's
that way.
really
So,
cool.
it's amazing how Krishna, like, okay, here's a little bit of nectar, and let's connect this guy with this guy again.
Right, right. I definitely have questions later about, how you get guests and things like that for your Prabhupada memories. But let's take it back to, so you were in Dallas and you joined in Dallas, uh, and then what happened?
Well, from Dallas, I didn't like the weather there, and so we decided to move to Denver.
Okay.
And I got we went up there for a vacation once, and just to see what it was like, to see other production companies, maybe turn in a resume, etc. And while we were there, and I did, and they actually hired me. And this production company, which is an ABC affiliate, said, yes, we want you. We have a need for an editor.
Oh, wow.
So I said, that's great. And so then we planned on, packing up and moving back to Denver. While we were there for the job interview, we were still, inclined philosophically, et cetera. We were attached to knowing more about Krishna. And we drove, while we were there to do the interview, we drove up to Boulder.
Mm.
And there was a temple there that was formed. Tulsidas, I think maybe was there, but Kuru Shrestha, who I remember, distinctly coming out. I was in the car, and there was a temple there, and he came out and realized that we were like semi-interested, karmis that were maybe potential buyers for books, and he came out with the big Krishna book, the silver Krishna book.
Right.
I had given a donation of $20 or something like that, and he came, oh, here, take this Krishna book. So that was, again, another contact with the devotee after our contact with the devotees in Dallas.
Mm.
And so when we went back to Dallas and got our stuff, moved back, and then I started working as an editor for the production company there. But as things would happen in 2 or 3, 4 years, as Krishna says in the Gita, there's 4 reasons why someone comes to Krishna, seeks out God. You're distressed, in need of money, inquisitive, and in search of knowledge, right? So that's generally how most of us come. So I was like a combination of all those. So in my personal story, and it's not unique, my wife and I, we had actually at that time, I was distressed because we had divorced, we had parted ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I turned to the temple for solace, and I would go there every Sunday, I think it was, and at night, and they would after the offering, and I would be there, and Mother Puja would come out with warm halava and hot milk with bananas in it.
Oh, wow.
And feed me this great prasadam and preach to me, and Srinivas would come out, and Dugdapan would come out and, sit down, and, they had a live one, so they had a fish on the hook. So,
right.
and so they reeled me in, and it just became less tolerable to live out there in the material world, suffering and in anxiety and stress. And and I said, okay, let's join. But actually, prior to coming to to Denver, and joining the temple as a full-time devotee, I had gone to greet Prabhupada at the airport.
Oh, wow.
So that was my first personal contact with Srila Prabhupada, taking him with the other devotees back to the temple.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, it was in Gurley, on Gurley Avenue, the temple that's there now. And there was a huge crowd, and I was one of the members of the crowd. It was a Sunday feast lecture, and after the lecture, they opened it up for Q&A, questions and answers. And I remember distinctly, like, I know that the essence of the lecture was about the benefit and the glories of chanting Hare Krishna. That's all I remember about that. But what I remember and take away from that was the first question that was posed to Prabhupada after they opened it up for questions. And this guy was like maybe 10 feet in front of Prabhupada and kind of in a challenging mood said, right to Prabhupada, he said, what do you're talking about chanting Hare Krishna, but what do you feel? What do you personally feel when you chant Hare Krishna? And in a heartbeat, without a moment's hesitation, Prabhupada said, I feel no fear.
Wow.
And it like hit my heart. I was in the audience. I was like, wow, okay. Because I was full of fear.
Right.
It was the middle of the Vietnam War. I could have been drafted. There was a fear of that. Who doesn't have fears in the material world? That's what this material world is primarily made up of.
Right.
Are we going to have enough money to survive on? Are we going to get COVID? Are we going to, get married? And we're going to have a boyfriend? Am I going to get a girlfriend? Whatever those material desires are in the heart that come up, there's fear of the fear is there to know whether that'll ever be fulfilled or not. So that's what hit me in the heart. And it wasn't like a mental process. It was not an intellectual thing. Oh, yes, let me think about that for a while. But it was immediate. Not only did I believe that to be the absolute truth, that if I chant Hare Krishna, I will not have fear.
Yeah.
And I've found that to be true when I sincerely and chant properly. That is the effect that I feel and benefit from. But also the second thing I realized was that Prabhupada and Krishna are like this, that he is connected with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Paramama. I didn't know the name Paramama at that time, but I knew that he was not an ordinary human being and that here was somebody I could trust, that I could, put my faith in, that he's not out here to cheat me. That was the realization that I got.
Wow, wonderful. So then how did you, so you had already had a background in film and editing and things, but is that what you did when you first joined the temple? Because maybe sometimes when I hear so many times the devotees joining, they have a certain propensity, but they don't actually get involved in that immediately.
That's what I wanted to do.
Right.
Because I had, talk about fear, I had the fear of shaving my head, putting on a bed sheet, and I think I had pairs of socks that were the same color, but at that time, but I had, because I thought I was this body and that I'm going to go out there and be embarrassed,
Right.
It's not the first person to think like that, but that's the thought I had. So I said, well, God, if I can, engage in a service where I can like be in a room and edit, make films. And at that time, Yadabar and Vishaka had the Spiritual Frontier, I think, and Hare Krishna World. And so I called them up.
Oh, really?
We didn't have email then, but I called them up and said, hey, look, I know your guys are great producers. I'm an editor. I'm here at your service. Come on, help me out here. But they said, no, that's okay. We got it covered, and I go, oh, okay, well, whatever. But later on, I realized that that's actually a benediction, that they turned me down because I was able to go on Harinam, enjoy that, and I could preach on the street, and I became a book distributor and realized that the taste that you get when you distribute a book to somebody was actually a higher relish, a higher taste than sitting down and cutting and pasting and editing a movie and putting through the moviola. And, I enjoyed that. I can do that, 18 hours a day. But the actual nectar that you feel in the heart doesn't compare to giving transcendental knowledge to somebody.
Mm.
So I thank Yadabar and Vishaka for turning me down.
Wow. And then so you did book distribution and you were Bhakti leader for some time. How many years was that until you kind of led into actually doing videos for ISKCON?
Well, I was a Bhakti leader for, I think, a couple of years. I really enjoyed that.
Mm-hmm. Just like new people coming in and kind of showing them the ropes.
Showing the ropes. We'd have Bhakti class and then, help them hear their rounds properly. Like if they were doing nish, 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 na, rum, 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 I would say, excuse me.
It's interesting we don't do that anymore.
Yeah, no,
I
we
don't
need
know if
somebody.
anyone who does that, because
Yeah.
it would be seeming like that someone's being offensive if you're kind of correcting someone like that. But if that's how they did it in the old times, that's really good. I would like that if someone told me that.
Well, I had the authority to do it, so I
Right.
could come up and fault find without them getting annoyed. Actually, when I was in India, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I met a devotee who was one of my bhaktas back then.
Oh, really?
Anuttama is one of my bhaktas, by the way.
Anuttama,
The communications director.
Really?
Yeah, so he's going to help me get back to God.
That's amazing.
But anyway, I met this other devotee who was still a devotee, and he was one of my bhaktas, and I kind of remember his face, but this was like decades afterwards.
Yeah.
And he came up to me and he said, "Listen, I want to thank you, Siddhanta, because when I was a new devotee and I was always falling asleep during japa, you would kindly come up and you would give me a piece of burfi from the morning offering, and it would keep me awake." And so he liked that.
That's so sweet.
It was, one of the loving thing. I didn't even realize it was a loving exchange, but we know that is that when you give to someone, prasadam and you accept it, that's a loving exchange. So he remembered that over 30, 40 years. So
that's amazing. Did you see any more people that you were a leader to after?
Yeah, let's see if I can remember their names. They'll come to me.
Okay,
but there are 2 or 3 others that are still in the movement.
Right. So, what was the first film that you, or how did that happen? The first film that you made, or produced, or edited for ISKCON specifically?
Well, the first one was the wedding documentary. That was the first one,
wedding. Okay,
back in '71. But being in Denver, I was a Bhakti leader, Sankirtan leader, but then I had started giving classes at the universities and high schools. That was my program prior to coming to LA, where I then began this ISKCON television production company. That Nrsingananda called me and said he was starting a production company that he wanted me. He was the one that reached out to me.
Oh, okay.
And said, "Look, I heard you're an editor. Can you come and be my partner?" And we became co-partners and producing spiritual videos.
That must have been music to your ears.
It was like God sent. Krishna said, "Okay, here's this guy, Nrsingananda, and here's this guy over here in Denver." And Nrsingananda was in LA and said, "Let's put these 2 rascals together and see if we can produce something."
Wow.
So I said, okay, it was time to leave, time to leave Denver. So went to LA and you asked me what the first one was that we edited.
Yeah. What was the first one?
That might be hard to remember, but the one that comes to mind was an interview that Hridayananda Maharaj gave with a guy named Ted Patrick.
Oh my goodness. I love that one. That's my absolute favorite interview. Oh, wow. You produced that?
Well, it was shot by the television station, but we got a hold of it and I edited it.
Because there was on tape and on ITV, the headings and all that. Wow.
Right. So at that time, we were supported by all the different temples. They kind of made a commitment to the BBT that they would send in money every month because we had to lease equipment. We had to lease cameras and editing gear, all these lights, microphones, etc. It's expensive.
Yeah.
And all we got was, at that time, it's called DM. You know what that is?
No.
Devotee maintenance.
Oh, okay.
So, we needed money just to pay the rent, the
Yeah.
temple there, whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
So the temples would send in from all over the world. They would send in monthly
Wow.
stipends that we would invoice them, and they would pay it, and they would support that. So that was, I think, what I remember was the first one that I edited, and was well received. Hridayananda Maharaj was fantastic in
Oh
defeating
gosh.
this demon who would kidnap devotees. His
Yeah.
parents would think that their children were brainwashed, and they would hold them down in a motel room for 2 or 3 days, and
Sleep deprive them and all kinds
so
of.
many different tactics.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I remember one story that comes to mind from the memory series. I don't know if it's time to interject one of those.
Please. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But in relationship to being kidnapped, devotee was kidnapped by his parents, and he finally escaped and came back to the movement. And it was in the darshan with Prabhupada, and Prabhupada, or he was complaining to Prabhupada, my parents did this, and they took me, and they had me brainwashed, and I hate my parents, and I'm never going to talk to them again. And, just riling on and explaining how he was so frustrated and disturbed and angry at his parents.
Yeah.
And Prabhupada simply was listening to him. And then he sat back and said, if you cannot forgive, why live?
Wow.
So that was a heavy comment that that we can all, use in our life, whether we were kidnapped by Ted Patrick or not, or so many instances where we might feel anger towards somebody.
Yeah.
And are holding, in our heart, anger or whatever emotion that's negative, that by forgiving, then we can go on living. Then if we can't forgive, then why live? But anyway, that was one video that I remember producing pretty much right away.
Right.
Because we had to take things from various sources. We hadn't shot anything yet.
Mm-hmm.
But in time, we had cameras now. And one major production that we did with our cameras was produce the Ramayana, which Yadabara and Sringananda directed and shot in New Vrindavan.
Oh, that one. That one's great.
With Lokamangala as Ravana.
Yes.
And Prajapati was his brother, and Nanda Kishore was.
Was it the one
Lakshman.
where Ravana's court was in that temple room at the palace?
Right.
Oh, that one. Oh my goodness, that one is good.
Yeah,
I love
it's a
that one.
classic. It really was a classic.
Such a classic.
And I went. It was amazing because about 2 years ago, I went to France to collect some more interviews.
Uh-huh.
And went to Paris to fly there, and then I flew down and drove into a community called Mirepoix. It's a town called Mirepoix.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a group of devotees, a community of devotees there. And so I'm doing interviews, and then they served prasadam. It's time to take lunch. And this young girl comes up, younger to me, but she was probably 30 or something. And she said, oh, I recognize your voice. Were you involved with the Ramayana? And I said, yeah, I edited it, and I actually had some of my voice was there. I had the voice of Dasarath and some of the demons and Jatayu. I was the voice of Jatayu. But so she recognized my voice. She said, oh, yeah. She said, I grew up watching that, and I wanted to show that to my 6-year-old daughter, but how do I get it?
Wow.
It's like, okay. She said, I watched it 10 times, 20 times, or whatever. It was the source of entertainment for children in that age, within ISKCON.
Totally. I mean, all those things, like even the puppet shows, you produce those as well, right?
Sringananda and I produced that. I edited it, and I was the narrator for those. But the main producers really were Burijan and his wife,
Jagatarini.
Jagatarini, right.
Yeah.
It was their concept, their script, and they did the puppets,
Yeah.
and their voices, and also um, great actor, great devotee from England. I'm so bad with names. He
Oh,
was
I know who you're talking about.
he lives in
That was my.
Detroit now.
Oh, lives in Detroit now.
Now he lives in Detroit.
Oh, okay. I don't know.
Starts with a B. Help me, Krishna.
Okay. Anyway,
And it'll come to me. Anyway, he
yeah.
was a brilliant actor. And so,
Okay.
anyway, we had, I think, 18, 20 different puppet shows, all based on
Yes.
Krishna's pastimes and stories from the Bhagavatam.
Wow. And so then when did the idea of doing the interviews about Prabhupada come into your, into your mind?
Nishringananda and I at one point bought new cameras, and I think maybe a week or so after we got these new cameras, Shruti Kirti came to our studios here in LA. And, he was Prabhupada's servant, personal servant for 2.5 years. And he's, talk about having Boomadev. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, bad memory is Boomadev. Great devotee.
Yes.
Great. I love him.
So you're saying Shruti Prabhu came?
So Shruti Kirti came to the studio and we had this new camera. Said, well, we've got these new cameras. Let's test them out. And so we sat Shruti Kirti in a director's chair, turned on the camera, put a microphone on him, and he just started talking about, I don't even know if I asked him questions, but I said, but tell me about, what it was like being Prabhupada's, secretary. So those stories were like, it hit me that these are amazing stories. I enjoy them.
Right.
And I think others would enjoy them too. So
Yes.
that was the key to the project. And it happened about the year that Nishringananda and I parted ways. And so I said, well, what am I going to do? Because part of our divorce settlement was that he would keep all the library and I would keep the equipment.
Mm-hmm.
So he had the library that we had built up over many years. And we also, did Coming Back, Reincarnation in America, these kind of documentaries that were popular in the day. So he kept that as a library. So I said, what am I going to do? So I, again, joined the commercial video workforce. But on my seva, on the time that I had downtime, I said, well, let me, interview somebody else that might have some nectar stories about Prabhupada.
Right.
And I would also like to give credit to Satsvarup because he, in the early days, produced a little red book, I think called Nectar of Prabhupada or something.
Prabhupada Nectar, yes.
Prabhupada Nectar.
I love those books.
So this is just an expansion of his idea. In other words, nothing's original in the material world. So I can't take credit for, that idea. That was coming from him. So I took that inspiration and then interviewed Hridayananda Maharaj as one of my first interviewees, who kindly wrote the introduction, or not the introduction, but the forward. The forward to the books.
Right.
That have been transcribed from all the interviews that I've done. I've now produced 5 books. A little shameless promotion. Here's the
yeah, please. Amazing. 5 books.
5 books. This is the cover of the 5th book. Prabhupada chanting Gayatri at the temple there in New Mayapur, France.
Let me show so you don't have to hold that up. Let me show it. This one here.
Yeah, that photo was taken by Yogeshwar Prabhu.
Right.
Captures a real meditative. I mean, that's, you could meditate on that photo and
beautiful.
Chant your japa to that and keep focused. Wow.
Amazing. So who transcribed all the interviews into like text? I mean, that's a huge job.
Transcribing is a big job. That's one that I passed off to other devotees. Mm-hmm. And so they're all accredited or given credit in the introduction. Everyone that's Dina Dayadri is one. She was a professional transcriber. She did many stories, several books like that.
Wow.
And then anyone I could find. The last couple of books, devotee in Belgium did it. I gave the audio and the video to Ekanath at the archives in North Carolina. And
All
then
right.
he knew this devotee in Belgium that had some software to do
Oh,
it. I think it's called Dragon software for
okay.
PC that you just run the audio through and it kind of spits it out.
Oh, interesting.
So that was a
Great.
huge job that is relatively easy now with the technology.
I like to ask you, I've been doing this interview thing, like this is my 50th episode, and I feel I have been changed by hearing like devotees talk about their stories or talk about Prabhupada or talk about any kind of subject. Now you've been doing this for like 31 years,
Mhm.
84 videos, 132 hours of Prabhupada's stories. Now, how has that shaped you?
That's edited.
That's edited.
Yeah.
Wow.
In others, there's a lot more. I mean, I do leave
Right.
some things on the floor, on the editing room floor.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. Now, how did that shape you as a person? Like, did it shape you as a person? Like, as time went on and more interviews went on, did you see Prabhupada differently? Did you see yourself differently and other devotees differently? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, how can you not become inspired or change your life, when you hear about the pure devotee? That's the essence of these teachings, is that the stories and the pastimes of Krishna are the same stories of and inspiring, and you can learn lessons from the pure devotee. It's non-different.
Hmm.
This is why actually Prabhupada translated the Krishna book prior to when he really wanted to. He originally said, don't jump over all the cantos
Yeah.
before you read the 10th canto. But he wasn't sure how long he was going to live, being an elderly body at that time. And he wanted to impress upon his disciples that Krishna is a person. This was the main reason that he wanted to produce and print the Krishna book ahead of time. Because we were all impersonalists. We all think God is an energy or bright white light, or we're atheists or whatever. So by presenting the Krishna's pastimes and his characteristics, we learn to develop love for him as a person.
Right.
So similarly, when we're hearing stories about Prabhupada, these are stories that you don't normally get in a Bhagavatam class that Prabhupada
Yeah.
gave in his
Yeah.
lectures. And these are, amazing stories. And when you learn more about his qualities, his compassion, Prabhupada's humor, his wit, his determination, his humility, all the 26 qualities of a pure devotee, and his humor. I've got some stories about his humor that people don't realize. The Prabhupada has a sense of humor.
Tell us
And
one. Tell us one, please.
One is from Guru Das. He says that when he was with Prabhupada, and Mataji came up and said, "Oh, Swamiji," this was the early days when he was called Swamiji.
Yeah.
"Swamiji, you look so nice today." And Prabhupada said immediately, "Just today?" Very quick
Right.
way,
Right.
Tribhuvannath Prabhu, who, he's like a pure devotee, who's no
Yeah.
longer with us too, was in the car with Prabhupada, and they were trying to impress upon Prabhupada all their ability to get devotees to join the temple. And he said, "Srila Prabhupada, one of the Queen's guards has joined the temple." The Queen's guards with the big furry hats and everything.
Right. Right.
And Prabhupada said, "Oh, so what about the Queen?" That wasn't
Wonderful.
enough. He wanted to go higher. Prabhupada always
Yes.
encouraged us to go higher.
Yes.
Um, um, Another one was when Jamuna was getting married to Guru Das, there was a fire sacrifice.
Yeah.
And, the fire sacrifice, you have these sticks that you dip in ghee and put in build a fire that way.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't have clarified butter. They had margarine or something like that was not a good fire agent.
Right.
And so when Prabhupada was, and he did the ceremony, he was the one performing it, not like Mohanananda and other devotees in the future, later on, later on, because Prabhupada was everywhere and doing other things, and he couldn't officiate and do so many things that
Mm-hmm.
he would say, okay, the temple president would now officiate the wedding or whatever, or the initiations. So, but this was the early days. So Jamuna and Guru Das were getting married, and Jamuna tells a story that when Prabhupada dipped the wood into the butter, the margarine, and tried to light it, it would go and it wouldn't light. It wouldn't catch on fire. And Prabhupada said, "Oh, this marriage will have a very slow start." And that's not so much humor, but it's like it's taking what he observes, and then translating that into a meaningful lesson to be learned. And then when Jamuna says when she heard Prabhupada say that, she said, "Oh no, what have I gotten myself into now?"
Okay.
But she went ahead with it, and they made a great team.
Yeah.
Prabhupada, somebody said to Prabhupada, I must have fallen into Maya. And Prabhupada said, "You're always in Maya. Sometimes you fall into Krishna."
Oh gosh.
That's a classic story.
Yeah.
And then the kind of another classic one showing Prabhupada's humor was with Hansaduta. I'm going to take a sip of water here.
Please, yeah, me too.
Hamsaduta told me the story when he got initiated. Before he got initiated, he was a little, coming from Germany, he really didn't like his name. His name growing up, his birth name was Hans Carey.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, he didn't like that. And when he got around the devotee, he said, "Oh, I can't wait to get initiated so I can get a spiritual name."
Yeah.
That was just inside his heart. That's something that he was dealing with. He didn't like his name, Hans Carey. So when he finally got to initiation with Prabhupada, he thought before he came up to get his beads and get his name, he thought that he was going to get, because at that time, most of the time, your given birth name, the letter that it starts with, you'll get a spiritual name that starts with that same letter.
Right.
My birth name was Steve, so I got Siddhanta. Hans starts with H, so he thought he'd get a Hanuman or a Hari or something.
Right.
Prabhupada said, he gave him the beads and said, "Just add, your name is Hansaduta." And Hansaduta thought, "Hansaduta, what's that?" And Prabhupada clarified, it said, "Just Hans, just add the prefix Hans Aduta." So Hansaduta said, "Well, that's not a good name." He said, "My name is Hans Carey. I got Hans Aduta Adhikari." So he still got Hans Kari, Hans Aduta Adhikari. And he was not happy. And then later he came to Prabhupada and said, "Prabhupada, who is Hamsaduta? What is the meaning of it?" And Prabhupada said, "I don't know." And he was more frustrated. Hamsaduta was more frustrated. He went out and it doesn't know what it means. And then he, another week, I'm paraphrasing, but another week or so went by, and Hamsaduta went back into Prabhupada's room. This was probably in Canada, in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
No, Montreal. Sorry, that's where he had the temple, which was like a bowling alley. And he went into Prabhupada's room again. Said, "But Prabhupada," and again, I don't know if it was Swamiji or Prabhupada at that time. And there's a story about that too. But he came in and said, "Prabhupada, where can I find the meaning to this name, Hamsaduta?" And Prabhupada said, "The Srimad Bhagavatam." That's all he said. He didn't give the canto or the verse or whatever. He was like leading, like making it a struggle for him. And then finally, there was another time that came about a year or so later where Prabhupada was having a darshan, and he was musing about different devotees in the room and musing about their names. Yeah. "Oh, you're Krishna Das, and that means this and that, and you're Sarabi Das, and that means that." And he's naming off 3 or 4 devotees that were in the room, and Hamsaduta was there. Finally, Prabhupada was explaining about what these names are.
Yeah.
And then Hamzaduda said, oh, Srila Prabhupada, who is Hamzaduda? And Prabhupada said, you are. So still, that was Prabhupada's sense of humor, and Hamzaduda recognized that was his sense of humor,
Wow.
that he still wasn't going to give him that answer, you know.
How did your conception of Srila Prabhupada change in the sense of, so we see Prabhupada very much represented by his books and what's in the Srimad Bhagavatam, what's in the purports, and that's how Prabhupada shaped to us who haven't met him. But when someone like you, who has so much exposure to the interviews and who's heard all, more than 132 hours, that's just what came on the video, but thousands of hours, I assume. How has he developed in your eyes from being a Prabhupada who's like very stern and strict to someone who has that kind of liberal side?
It's revealing, and it's like we have to understand that Prabhupada is just not the heavy guru on the Vyasa-san.
Right.
He has that. He has to present that as the teacher. He has to like beat this philosophy and into our brains and our hearts. You know, we were impersonalists when we came to him, or atheists, and so we have to have that portion of that teaching. We need that side of a guru, but at the same time, we learn from these stories that Prabhupada is a person. He's just not a heavy guru, but he has a personality that we can develop love and attachment for. And that is revealed in these stories. And it's similar to someone, actually, Jai Chaitanya just emailed me 2 days ago and said, I love these stories. It's just like the Bible. And it is, because we learn, in Christians, we learn about Jesus and the love that he had for his, disciples and everyone, feeding them, and would be forgiving, and so many different attributes that you say, God, I want to be a Christian. Jesus is my savior. Right. And in the same vein, here's Prabhupada, who is a pure devotee, who we say at least on the same level of Jesus. He's come to teach love of God.
Yeah.
Lord Chaitanya, that is the message. And so how do we develop love for Prabhupada? By reading these stories about him that show us and tell us so many ways that he was kind to his devotees, how he was merciful, how he was lenient. He showed humility. He showed so many different qualities that are so attractive that how can you not develop love for this kind of person when you know these things? Just like in the material world, if you're going to have a relationship, like even an arranged marriage, you sit down and you say, okay, what do you like? Do you like to eat this? Do you like that? Or, karmis even do that. Do you like this kind of movie? Do you like to dance? Or do you like this kind of music? Or you find out about what the other person's likes and characters are. Are you a compassionate person? Do you have a sense of humor? All these things that even just on a material level is natural for us. So it's natural for us to want to know what are those loving qualities that Prabhupada had and how did he show those? And then when we learn about those things, then we can develop love for him. Sometimes it's easier to remember Prabhupada than it is Krishna. I mean, Krishna, who has seen Krishna except for maybe the pure devotee, in reality, seen him face to face. And it reminds me of the story that Jai Gauranga told me, how in Mexico City, Prabhupada was giving a lecture, one of those Sunday feast lectures, and again they opened it up to Q&A afterwards. Yeah. And Prabhupada was talking about the Gita, and Krishna saying, and I'm summarizing his 45-minute lecture into one purport, but the essence was that if you can think of Krishna at the time of death, you will attain him. This is the Gita. So a lady who was not a devotee, but a lady in the community came, and she raised her hand and asked the question, Srila Prabhupada, you've been explaining how if we think of Krishna at the time of death, that we will attain him and go to the spiritual world then. I said, yes. What will happen if I think of you at the time of death? Will that have the same effect? Prabhupada sat back just for a moment and meditated on that and said, yes, that will have the same effect. Wow. That is very nice.
Wow.
So if we can't focus, our atheistic or impersonalist heart on Krishna. And who knows? I mean, the artists are like incredible artists. They've given us the most amazing, mirror to the, was it the
Windows to the
window to the
spiritual world.
spiritual world? Thank you.
Right.
So they've given us that, but does Krishna look like this artist rendering? Is it, is he this colored? But here we can have the pure devotee and so many stories about him that if we're thinking of him at the time of death, that if it's easier for us, for me, you asked me about my personal thing. For me, it'll be easier because I was also personally with him on morning walks, etc. So for me, that is more easily attainable if I can focus my mind on Prabhupada at the time of death. So these stories, all these anecdotes contained within the memory series in the video form or in the book form, one can learn about Prabhupada. For devotees, Prabhupada disciples that weren't able to have that personal association, and of the 5,000 devotees that were there in those 11, 12 years that Prabhupada was here to initiate, not everyone had the opportunity, like I had and so many others, to be on those morning walks or have those darshans. And so here's the opportunity to get the lessons and the realizations they learned by hearing these oral histories. So these oral histories are very significant for that purpose, to develop attachment for Prabhupada.
That's really amazing. I mean, for those of us who didn't meet him, like you said, like we're able to associate and to kind of get a little glimpse into what it was like to be in his presence. And I think that's so incredibly valuable, to the point where some devotees actually joined from watching these interviews. Like, for example, that just the other day, my friend Jay Jagannath Prabhu, he said after he became a devotee, he watched all the memories 12 hours a day for like a week. And he said that kind of shaped him in the coming times as a devotee, just to hear what Prabhupada was like, what he liked, what he didn't like, what his reaction were to different things, different situations. I mean, that's a very, very valuable. And I mean, I can't thank you enough. And the whole society is just super grateful to you for doing that.
Well, I love the feedback, and hopefully it doesn't go to my head, but it's not me. I mean, I'm just the facilitator. It's really all the devotees I've interviewed. It's their stories that I'm just, sharing. So, but thank you for that. It reminded me of a Bhakta Brad came up to me about a year ago before COVID hit, where I would go to the temple here in LA on Saturday and Sunday and show the memories while they ate prasadam. So just before they honored prasadam that morning, this devotee Bhakta Brad Brahmachari came up, said, Siddhanta, I have to tell you something. I said, what? He said, I joined this movement because I watched all of your memories on YouTube. I didn't read one book. I just joined because of hearing all these stories.
Amazing.
So I said, wow, thank you for sharing. That's and he's now a disciple of Giriraj Maharaj, and he just took second initiation. He's now Bhakta Das, I think.
I mean, just that in itself makes the whole thing incredibly successful, that, people join just because of watching these interviews.
Before you go on, let me just add one thing before I forget.
Sure.
So again, it's not, I thank you for the feedback, and it does help me carry on, and I thank everyone for acknowledging that, but which makes my day and gives me the impetus, inspires me to collect more memories. But it's really that Prabhupada is there in these oral histories.
Right.
It's like a spiritual scientific evidence that Prabhupada said, when asked by a reporter, what will happen when you die? Prabhupada said, I will never die. I will live forever in my books. So I'm finding that Prabhupada is also living in these oral histories, in the lessons that instructions that he's given just on morning walks that we won't find or hear and the lectures from the Bhagavatam class. And he lives in his in the qualities that the devotees exhibit and will relate, and what they realize that's Prabhupada. Prabhupada is there. And another symptom that I think in the Nectar Devotion, when you can read and hear something over and over again and not grow tired of it, Nitya, saving up. I forget, my Sanskrit is not good. I'm not a very good scholar. But When you can hear something over and over again, then you know it's spiritual.
Right.
So I've been told that, devotees can hear these stories over and over again and not grow tired of them. So that's just an example, a symptom that Prabhupada is contained within these oral histories.
Yes. Yes. I mean, his presence is felt when you listen to it. And if you listen to them over and over and you listen to many, then you can kind of, at least for me, it was, you can kind of shape, Prabhupada comes up very much alive to someone when they hear that about them.
They go into a kind of a regression. There's this new age technology where a hypnotist will take somebody back,
right,
to their early days and try to find out why they're having bad behavior or psychotic symptoms. But when I interview somebody, it's kind of like that, where I can actually see their face and their whole body go back in time to when they were on that morning walk with Prabhupada.
Wow.
And they're there, and I'm kind of taken back in there. I'm there 30 years ago, wow, right. I'm on that walk. Because the devotees are amazing, because they can describe it so well. And the description is very visual, that I'm taken back to India, morning walk, like Swarup told a story that's in the latest volume too. He was a great storyteller, great devotee too. I love Swarup. But he describes how he's on a morning walk in India, and it was summertime, and it was so hot and just miserable. I don't know if you've been to India before, but it's, it's not like Cancun or anything, but right. So anyway, you have to be, pretty spiritually elevated to live there for any length of time. But anyway, it was a miserable day, hot, humid, and flies were coming around him. Couldn't get rid of the flies. And he was so frustrated and angry with the flies. So on the morning walk, he's next to Prabhupada. Prabhupada, are there flies in the spiritual world? And Prabhupada said, yes, but they're not bothersome like they are here. And when they buzz, they're chanting Hare Krishna.
Wow. So
how would you know that unless you heard the story from Swarup about flies? You won't hear that from a Bhagavad. Generally speaking, you wouldn't.
Yes,
I've never read that in the books, but
right.
That's the essence. That's the importance of having a pure devotee on the planet. Not only is the Shakti there, but you're able to ask Prabhupada, particular questions and get the right answer. There might be some confusion. Like Ranchor told me, who's also a dear God brother, he let me stay at his house when I went to the UK, in Glastonbury.
Right.
Great wife too, to and allow us to stay there. But he tells the story that when he was with Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was giving class, and then Prabhupada asked him to stand up and speak and say something. Yeah. Prabhupada would often, not often, but sometimes do that, to have his disciples, to show that it's just not Prabhupada, it's the knowledge. And we're like the mailman passing down and giving the letter unopened. So we're doing our job perfectly. So he sometimes wanted to see how his disciples would, preach and see if they were on point. So this time Ranchor said, okay, he got up a little nervously, but he said, the first thing he recounted to me was that he said, this material world is a place of happiness and distress. Prabhupada immediately cut him off. He said, no, only distress. So I previously before hearing that story, I was thinking that it is concomitant factors of happiness and distress. We're going to hear that philosophy, there is some sense gratification, and there's some. Prabhupada said, no, it's only distress. So that's hammering down the point. This is not our home.
Yes.
Krishna, this Goloka Vrindavan, that is our home. So that was one point. And then he said that in that same address, he said, okay, he understood that. And then he says to the audience, the group of people that he's speaking to with Prabhupada there, when you're chanting Hare Krishna, you are attracting Krishna to you. And Prabhupada cut him off, said, no, when you chant Hare Krishna, Krishna is immediately with you. And that's an interesting point, that without this oral history, you wouldn't understand or get that. And that what I realized from that was that okay, well, I better be serious when I'm chanting my japa. That
Yeah.
Krishna is actually there, and it's just not some rote mechanical thing. That I'm actually not only asking Krishna to come toward, no, he's there with us.
Right. It's not like a means to an end, but it's actually the end.
He's there in that sound
Right, he's
vibration.
there.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, that's the, how would you get that if Prabhupada hadn't told him that? How would you get that
Yeah.
if without Prabhupada, the pure devotee, being on the planet? Krishna sent him to us.
Right. I'd like to ask you about like some of the interviews specifically, like what's one of them that shocked you the most? Like when they said that, you're just like, I've never heard that. That's like unbelievable.
An unbelievable one. I'll tell you an unbelievable one.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot, but one comes to mind. I mean, there's over 2,500 stories within the series.
Wow.
So to pick out one is, I mean, every year I try to come up with the top 10, best of.
Yeah.
So I've got about 7 or 8 discs, DVDs that are, the best of. But anyway, this one is kind of like an unbelievable one that is told by Shamashundar Prabhu. Also, very, very dear disciple of Prabhupada. And he's also a great author. Chasing Rhinos with the Swami is his book. But he told me the story when I interviewed him in Vrindavan at the MBT years ago. And he described how when he had developed a relationship with the Beatles, primarily George Harrison, that Prabhupada had told him prior to this one meeting that he had with Prabhupada that he's told Mukunda and Shamashundar and the 7 devotees, Malati and Jamuna, who Guru Das, who went to England, once they developed a relationship with the Beatles, just to get them prasadam, give them books, don't ask for anything. This is not our position. We shouldn't be beggars. But at this time, Prabhupada had just finished translating the Krishna book, but didn't have the money to print it. Right. It was $19,000 to print it. Didn't have the money to print it. So he asked Shamashundar to go to George Harrison to ask for this donation.
Right.
And Shamashundar said, no, Srila Prabhupada, I don't think that's a good idea. You told us just to give him. And he didn't want to be the beggar to George Harrison, because he was a friend. They became buddies,
right.
That you just don't really want to ask your friend for money in that sense,
And so that amount was a big amount,
a huge amount at that time.
Yeah.
And Prabhupada, said, and Shamashundar, I don't know, Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, don't worry, Krishna will help you. And then he sent him on his way. So he had the order, he had the direction from the pure devotee, from his spiritual master. What are you going to do? You have to. What are you going to do?
Yeah. So
there was one evening shortly thereafter where he had dinner with George Harrison and David Wynne, who was a sculptor laureate of England. He had made the bust of the Queen Elizabeth and so many other, politicians, etc. So that day, Shamashundar went with George and David Wynne to pick out some marble for the altar. Now, whether it was Berry Place or the Manor, I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But he had just spent a huge amount, thousands of dollars, to get this huge piece of marble for the altar already that day. And now he's like faced with the chore of asking George for more.
Yeah.
So they're having dinner. It's late at night. They finally finish their dinner, and he's like, Shamasundar's thinking, okay, how am I going to get up the nerve to do this? And what am I going to say? Because I have the order of the spiritual master. I have to ask him for it. So after dinner, they finish late at night, and he takes George aside and said, George, Srila Prabhupada asked me to ask you something. He made Prabhupada the bad guy. That's how he describes it, because he didn't want to say, well, I need the money, but Prabhupada, and George loved Prabhupada. So Shamashundar said, George, Prabhupada wanted to ask me if you could help print the Krishna book has just been translated, but we don't have the money to print it. And as Shamashundra is telling him this, he could see George's face go, oh God, here we go. Here's just another group asking me for money. This is the facial expression that he's getting from George.
Yeah.
And he says, and then Shamashundra says, and it's $19,000 to print it. And we just, at this time, he could see his eyes roll up in his head. George is like rolling his eyes like, oh my God. Here they go. They're just hitting me up again, just like these other groups. And just at that moment, when George was rolling his eyes up in his head, obviously thinking, oh my God, here's just another group, there was a bolt of lightning that struck, and the sound was simultaneous. And the lightning struck the house, and all the lights went out.
Oh my gosh.
When you see lightning and then you count, 1,000, 2, 1,000.
Right.
Then you hear the thunder.
Right.
That's how many miles away the lightning actually was. Well, the lightning and the thunder sound was simultaneous. It actually hit the house and turned and, got rid of all the power in the house. And they were standing there. Shamashundra and George Harrison are standing there in his house. It might have been David Wynn's house. I forget whose house they were in. But the light went out. And they were standing in darkness for 5-10 minutes without saying anything. They were silent. They were like bewildered. Finally, the lights come on. Immediately, George says to Shamashundra, well, how much was it then? So George's a very spiritual guy.
Yeah.
He knows that was a sign from Krishna, like, don't think like this. This is the pure devotee. He's asking you, surrender. And of course, we know in the Krishna book, you have George's, nice comments, right, as a preface or an introduction to it, and he signs it. All things must pass, or no, what did he say? All there is love. Yes, George Harrison.
Wow, amazing. I have a comment here from a devotee, my friend Anantacharya from England. He says, it was Bury Place and Radha and Ishwar still stand on the same marble base.
Wonderful. Wow. Thank you, Amit. Thank you.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What about your favorite interview? Which one is your favorite?
Oh.
I mean, it's
you're
hard.
You're going to get me in trouble here.
Your personal favorite.
That's so hard.
Maybe not the specific one, but maybe
I'll tell you one that a lot of devotees. I'll tell you one that a lot of devotees have told me.
Sure.
That they like a lot, and out of the thousands, but this one is told by Vamanajan, and he tells a story about when he joined the movement. He joined with a friend of his they were buddies together before they joined the movement, and when they joined, his name became Bhaskar, and when they joined the movement, they did everything together. Their services kind of coincided along the way. And they, do you know the story? You know where I'm going with this one? Okay.
No, I don't.
All right, I'm going to another sip of water.
I'm smiling because I love hearing about this. They're just fantastic. I love it's like bringing back all these. I mean, I hadn't heard them in a long time. Just to hear them again, it is like rekindling my attraction for hearing it again.
Okay, yeah, good. So anyway, they joined the temple together. They did services together, and there was one point in New Vrindavan when there was a lot of hooligans and ruffians that would attack the devotees and cause trouble. And so there was a time where they said, okay, we got to have a bodyguard. They even carried weapons. When Prabhupada came there, they were protecting him in that way. They were bodyguards.
Yeah.
So at that time in New Vrindavan, they had bodyguards that were like, one person would do it for 24 hours a day. And that was like ridiculous. You need sleep during the day. So they realized, okay, let's split this up into 3 8-hour sessions, segments for one devotee to be a bodyguard for 8 hours. And then the next guy will be a bodyguard, blah, blah, blah. So they became Prabhupada's bodyguards. And specifically in LA, Bhaskar had the morning shift. And then Vamanajan had I think the evening shift. But after one of the shifts that Bhaskar had, he came to his friend, Vamanajan. He said, I've been observing Prabhupada. I'm being his, we're his bodyguard, and I've been observing him, and that you could set your watch to him. Prabhupada is so regular that you could set your watch to, okay, he gets up in this time and he chants at this time and he goes on a morning walk at this time.
Wow.
It goes to the temple room at this time. I mean, it's a fact. He really could, because he was so regulated, which is another example. As an acharya, that's how we should, set our life to, that type of regularity. It helps calm the mind and the heart. So anyway, he comes to Vamanajan, Bhaskar does, and says, I've noticed that when Prabhupada comes back from his morning walk, that when he comes to the temple, he takes his slippers off at the door before entering the temple, goes into the temple, sits on the vyasas, or pays his obeisances to the deities, sits on the vyasa, gives class, comes back, puts on his slippers, walks up the stairs. Here in LA, his quarters are upstairs, right above the temple room.
Right.
So you walk up the stairs, and then when he walks up the stairs, before he enters his room, he takes off his slippers and leaves them at the foot of the door, so he doesn't wear his shoes inside his room.
Right.
He's taught us that cleanliness. So Vamanajan says, yes. So he said, well, I've noticed who makes these slippers, the manufacturers. And I noticed the size that Prabhupada wears. And I've gone out and bought an exact pair just like that. And Vamanajan said, well, yeah, but you're bigger than he is. Why would you get a pair of slippers the same size? You won't fit into those. Right. He said, I know, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to, when Prabhupada comes in the next day, comes in the temple room, he's going to leave his shoes, the slippers, outside the temple room door. And then when he goes into the class, I'm going to replace the slippers that I just bought, same make, same size, and then I'll take his slippers. And then when Prabhupada comes out of the temple room, he'll put on my slippers, walk up the stairs, leave those slippers outside his bedroom, and then I'll take the slippers, his original slippers, and then replace them for the ones that I bought that he would have worn at least once.
Right.
So I would have a pair of prasadam. I mean,
right.
To have slippers with the feet of the pure devotee.
Yeah.
That's some
priceless.
That's prasadam,
Right.
So he said, wow. Vamanajan said, wow, that's an interesting idea. I like that. He said, after you do it, tell me where I should buy my shoes. I want to do that too. So Bhaskar does it. And then the next day, Vamanajan says, so where do I get my shoes? And Bhaskar says, no, you shouldn't do it. He said, what do you mean you shouldn't? No, you shouldn't do it. And Vamanajan said, yeah, well, you got your slippers. Now you don't want to share, you don't want me to have my share. He said, no, you really shouldn't do it. And Vamanajan said, well, what happened? And Bhaskar said, well, I put my slippers out there when Prabhupada walked into the temple room, and I got his slippers. Prabhupada came back from the class, out of the temple room, put on my slippers that I had just bought, walked up the stairs, and walked right into his quarters. Didn't take the slippers off at the doorway for his quarters. And so Bhaskar is going, oh my God, what do I do now?
Right.
And he's, at the top of the stairs, a little foyer. There's a little place where you can chant, So he's out there. He's right outside Prabhupada's door chanting Hare Krishna. He doesn't know what to do now because he's got these pairs of slippers that Prabhupada wore, but he wasn't able to exchange them. Right. Because Prabhupada walked into this room with them. So as he's chanting there, he tells Vamanajan that a sannyasi came out right afterwards and said, are you Bhaskar? And he says, yes. He said, Srila Prabhupada has a message for you. He goes, oh no, Hare Krishna. Like he's in for it now. And the sannyasi says, well, Prabhupada says, thank you very much for the new slippers. And secondly, you may keep the old slippers. But more importantly, it is not nice to play tricks on the spiritual master.
Wow. Oh man, that's fantastic.
So, and you look at what can I derive from that? So, not only
Yeah.
do I learn that lesson not to play tricks on the spiritual master, but if you go a little deeper, like when Prabhupada told me that when he chants Hare Krishna, he feels no fear, and I realized in my heart that he must be like this with Krishna.
Hmm.
Prabhupada is not a magician that he can, when he's reading minds, which he can do, and he's done many times, but that's coming from Super Soul. Krishna is like saying, okay, here's this guy out here just played it. How would he know otherwise?
Mm.
And there are other stories like that too, where, he shows that he's not an ordinary human being.
Wow, that's fantastic. Out of the 5,000 disciples of Srila Prabhupada, how many have you interviewed?
I haven't counted them one by one, but I think it's over 400. It's going on 500 now. So maybe 10%.
Wow. Is there someone that you really would like to interview, but either you can't get in touch with them, you don't know where they are, or they refuse to get interviewed by you?
Funny thing you should mention, yes. There's one devotee that I've been trying for 25, 30 years is Siddha Sarupananda.
Oh, right.
He's not going to do it.
He doesn't want to do it.
No.
Interesting.
I've tried.
Interesting. I remember I contacted you about Adi Keshav. Was it Adi Keshav? Yeah, Adi Keshav Prabhu, who is a professor in a university now at
Mhm.
university where my neighbor who's lives across the street, he's also a devotee. He works at the same university that Adi Keshav Prabhu is a professor. So
Mhm.
he told me that the person is there. So as I told you that I contacted him and I said, hey, you want to come on my podcast and stuff? And he was like, Hare Krishna Prabhu, I'm sorry, I wouldn't like to. And you were telling me that you've been trying to get him as well.
Well, I emailed him. I found out his contact information.
Right.
But he didn't respond. So
it's a shame. It's a shame when
it happens.
It happens, right?
Yeah. It took me, in no disrespect to Rameshwar, took me about 20, 25 years for him to come around to my request. Bhagavan, I just interviewed Bhagavan. It took him a couple decades to come around.
Right.
So, I can only ask so many times, and then Krishna's in their heart, and when they're ready, then they can contact me.
Right.
Rupanuga is one who refused me actually in person request, but finally he's also agreed. And I actually bought my ticket to Florida. He's in Alachua, and COVID hit, so I had to put that ticket on hold. So I'm waiting, and he's waiting to be interviewed also. So he's a willing participant now.
That's wonderful. You know which other video that I like is Bhavananda on Broadway. You were in that, right? You were posing as like
I was the interviewer, newsman, skeptic. Well, before that became Bhavananda in Hollywood.
Oh yes, Bhavananda in Hollywood. Yes,
That was also a classic at that time.
Those are fantastic. Can we find all of those on YouTube?
Well, you can in one sense, because we used, for example, Bhavananda in Hollywood. I was the one that selected the music. The Eagles in California, Hotel California, the soundtrack for that album was the soundtrack behind a lot of our traveling shots. I was driving my Volvo as Bhavananda sat next to me. So that was the traveling music. So that we never cleared the rights for that music.
Oh, I see.
So YouTube is very, they're like on top of it now. So if you don't have the rights to a particular soundtrack or music, they'll delete. Actually, they deleted the entire audio for that one. So you can see me and Bhavananda there in Hollywood or in New York, but you may not be able to hear us.
I see.
I'm not sure about Bhavananda in Broadway, but that might be there. There was another one, they brought me on. I selected music from some classic composers. Vivaldi was one of them.
Mhm.
And for one of the chase scenes where after Ravana captures, kidnaps Sita, and Ram and Lakshman are running through the forest trying to find Sita.
Yeah.
So there's like a minute, they film different different scenes. I go right here and there. So during that chase sequence, I use Vivaldi. It's very, emotional.
Yes.
And I posted that on YouTube. The whole thing got on. The whole video came on, except for that one chase scene that
Oh.
YouTube, because it's BMI or one of the owners to that particular piece,
Yeah.
told YouTube, "Hey, delete that piece."
Right.
So you have to be careful in that regard. So I can't guarantee about Bhavananda on Broadway.
Right. What's the future now? Now that you've done these, 132 hours, 82, 84 videos, what's the future? Are you continuing to do this, or taking your energy elsewhere, or what's going on now?
Well, I have enough interviews currently that I've done over the last couple of years that I have not edited yet.
Oh, okay.
So I've got one or two of those in the on the editing bay, and then I do plan to interview Rupanuga. I am going back to New York to interview Yogeshwar again. He says he has some more stories to tell.
Oh, wow.
And Rabindra Swarup, who is on the series but not in depth interview that I want to
Yeah.
engage him with. So that'll take up 2 or 3 more videos. So that's there. But after this series might come to an end, then my desire is to have a video series called Sankirtan Stories,
Oh.
where I have devotees. I interviewed Dramila, for example, a couple
Mhm.
years ago, and I produced even a couple of DVDs of his stories. Incredible. He's an amazing devotee and a Sankirtan. He's a warrior and tells some amazing miracle stories, about being on Sankirtan and what can happen if you try and just go the extra mile and beat the mind with a shoe and go out there and distribute a book. Krishna will reward you with an amazing story that you could tell that could be inspiring for other potential or current book distributors.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do have a couple of stories, part of the memory series, that are similar to Sankirtan stories
Mhm.
that are like that. One was Divyanga. I don't know. Are we okay on time?
Yeah, we're okay on time. Yeah.
Okay. I could read one from Divyanga,
Yeah. Sure.
who's like, a lot of people say, well, why don't you actually make a lot of devotees ask me, well, why don't you have a series called How I Joined the Hare Krishna Movement?
Right.
And that's a thought, but I'm not going to do that because generally they're the same kind of stories in essence.
Mm.
I'm distressed. I'm in need of money. I'm inquisitive. I'm in search of knowledge.
Yeah.
That's basically the bottom line to it all. Some circumstances are a little different than others. But
Yeah.
this one from Divyanga, and I'm going to grab the water again.
Sure.
Generally like to tell stories just on my own, kind of like retell them because I've heard them so much. But this one, I'll tell reading from the book. And this is actually the transcription from my interview with Divyanga, who's still distributing Prabhupada's books, by the way.
Wow.
So this is an interesting story, how he joined the movement. And it's also a combination of a Sankirtan story. Okay. That's why I'm reading it, because you asked.
Yes.
The first time I saw Srila Prabhupada was at the San Francisco airport. However, I had joined the movement, but actually I joined a van. I was 17 years old and living in Ann Arbor, Michigan, when I saw a van full of devotees pull up at a gas station. I knew there was a big Moody Blues concert going to happen down the street, so I told my friend, hey, I'm going to get a ride with them. He said, he said, I'm not, or his friend said, I'm not riding with those guys. So I ran over to the van just thinking, I'm going to get a ride to the concert. I said, "You guys going to the concert?" They said, "Yeah, get in." I got in the van and Mrigendra handed me a Gita, a nectar devotion, and a Bhagavatam. He piled me up and said, "Give a donation." I happened to have $90 in my pocket, so I pulled out a 20 and gave it to him. They were all in dhotis and wearing tilak, and when we got to the concert, we had a kirtan in the van for maybe 15 to 20 minutes. After the kirtan, they all put on plain clothes and wigs. They said, "We're going to distribute this incense and these books at this concert. Would you like to help us?" Divyanga, who was Dan, I think his name was Dan at the time. I could be wrong. Sorry, Divyanga. Would you like to help us? And he said, I said, "Sure." Okay, I'm speaking now. I'm first person now.
Sure.
I said, "Okay, sure." So they gave me a big pile of incense and some little books, and we were standing there giving people incense and saying, "Give a donation for Bangladesh." That was the line back then, George Harrison in his concert for Bangladesh.
Right.
My friends were coming up going, "What the hell? What are you doing?" Anyway, I was giving out books and incense, and people were giving donations. I had a ticket to the concert and I sold it. And everybody went in the concert, and after everybody went in the concert, the devotee said, "Well, we're going to the temple. You want to come with us?" I said, "Okay," because for some reason I was attracted to this. The temple in Detroit was about 50 miles away from Ann Arbor, and when we got there, Govardhan came down to greet us. I was a macrobiotic at the time, eating brown rice and miso soup. But when I got there, Govardhan handed me a maha plate. On that maha plate were puris with powdered sugar, halava, gulab jamuns, and hot milk. He said, "Here." I hadn't eaten anything like that for about a year, and when I saw it, it was like, wow. I ate the whole plate, and then we went to bed. They said, "We're going to wake up kind of early, so don't be surprised." It seemed like I had just laid down, and the next thing I knew, they were clanging kartals in the brahmachari ashram, which was in the basement of the temple. I went to Mangal Artik, and they wrapped me in a dhoti and put some tilak on my head. Afterwards, I said, "Can you take me back to Ann Arbor today?" Prabhanu, who was the party leader, said, "Sure, we can take you back." On the way to Ann Arbor, he said, "But you want to stop and distribute a few more books before we get there?" So we stopped and we did Bhagavad Gitas. We went to a Pier 1 store, and the manager said we could do it. I couldn't believe it. He said, "Sure." We put cases of Bhagavad Gitas right in the foyer of his store. There were 2 doors, and he let us stand there for hours and sell Bhagavad Gitas. By the time the day was over, Mrigendra said, "You still want to go back to Ann Arbor?" I said, "Let's just go to the temple." I did that for maybe 4 days. Finally, we were driving around doing Sankirtan the 4th day, and Prabhanu said, "You don't mind if we don't go back to Ann Arbor, do you?" I said, "No, I don't care." And off we went to Cleveland, which was the temple they were from. So I joined and just never left. That was what Divyanga says, that was what happened to me.
Wow.
So he joined a van.
Amazing.
And then the other Sankirtan story that's in the memory series was told by Shruti Kirti recently when I interviewed him in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And he describes how he was giving a class here in LA. Giving a class about Prabhupada. He gives great classes.
Yeah.
Again, talking about his time with Prabhupada. And he describes how one time he was on an airplane with Prabhupada. And generally speaking, Prabhupada, not all the time, but at this time, Prabhupada was on the aisle seat. In the middle was Shruti Kirti next to him. And on the aisle, what did I say? Prabhupada was window seat. Middle was, did I say that? Yeah. Prabhupada was Prabhupada was window seat, Shruti Kirti in the middle. And on the aisle next to Shruti Kirti was Paramahamsa Swami.
Mm.
And generally the method was that after they took off, that Prabhupada was hungry. He would ask for prasadam then. So at this time, the ladies at the temple, wherever they were leaving from, had prepared puffed rice, which is cooked rice and puffed rice and the asafoetida and some other spices on it. The Prabhupada liked that very much. Mm. So right after they took off, Prabhupada said, "So prasad." And then Shrudakirti would get out the tiffin or whatever the container had the puffed rice, and he would put the puffed rice on Prabhupada's plate. Prabhupada honored the prasadam, and then he said, "So," and then that was the indication, the cue for them to take prasad, which was the remnants from Prabhupada's plate.
Right.
And he would then Shrudakirti would take Prabhupada's remnants, pour half on his plate and half on Paramahamsa Swami's plate. As they're eating, the flight attendant, back then they called them stewardesses. I have to be careful because my daughter Renika is a flight attendant, so I have to be careful. We don't call them stewardess anymore.
Right.
You have to be politically correct on that. So the lady flight attendant came down the aisle, and she was in first class. She comes down. They were in coach, and she looks kind of quizzically at what they're eating, and she leans over Paramahamsa and reaches out and grabs a handful of puffed rice. This is Maha Prasadam, okay, from Shrudakirti's plate, and eats it. Doesn't even ask him, "Oh, can I have some of that?" She just comes out, "Oh, that's good. I like that." And she said, I don't know if she said, "Are you vegetarian?" But it came out that she learned that they were vegetarians. So she said, "Well, can I get you something from first class? I can get you." And then Shrudakirti asked Prabhupada. Shrudakirti was like the translator. So Shrudakirti said, "Srila Prabhupada, would you like anything from first class?" And then it comes out that she was, "Oh, I can get you milk. I can get you some fruit and other things." And then Prabhupada said, "Yeah, some hot milk is nice." So Shrudakirti is telling this particular pastime in the class. It was during here in LA during a Prabhupada festival.
Yeah.
So they're all Prabhupada pastimes, generally speaking. And then after the class, Shrudakirti told me that after the class he had finished, and a devotee, Prabhupada disciple, came up to him and said, "Can I tell you a story?" And Shrudakirti said, "Sure, I love to hear stories too." So this devotee told Shrudakirti that he was distributing books in Brazil, and in dhotis. They were in dhotis, and generally they would, preach around in like the plaza, the city center, and where they would congregate and do chanting Harinam, where the church was or something. That's generally where people congregate, in the plaza center.
Yeah.
And then they would go out to the forest and the countryside and distribute Prabhupada's books in shaved head dhotis like this. So one day, this devotee comes upon a door by himself, knocks on the door, and a lady opens the door and she says, "Oh, Hare Krishna." And this guy in the middle of the forest, out of nowhere, here's someone chanting. How does this person in Brazil, they've never been there before, know Hare Krishna? She says, "Come on in." And he enters, and there's Prabhupada's books. There's pictures of Prabhupada all over the place. And he says, "Well, how do you know about, in the middle of Brazil, how do you know about Krishna, and how do you know about Prabhupada? You got pictures up here of Prabhupada." She said, "Well, a long time ago, I was a flight attendant for this particular airlines, and your Swami, your guru, was on this plane, and I ate some of his Maha Prasadam."
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's one of those unbelievable stories.
That's totally
So you never know where a book is going to land or where you're going to find a devotee.
My gosh. That's wow, what a story.
So I'm looking. Excuse me for interrupting.
Yeah.
So because I am going to start this series, and if anybody's out there who says, "Oh, I got a story," then please contact me.
Sure, yeah.
And you can contact me at prabhupadamemories@gmail.com. Can I say that?
Yeah, I can even post it on the screen here. You said Prabhupada Memories?
Yeah, but spell it out, Prabhupada with an A, at the end, at gmail.com.
Like this? Oops, sorry. Prabhupada Memories at gmail.com. That's how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, you can contact me there. Whether you have a Sankirtan story or you want to inquire about the books or the the videos. But I'm going to give you put out a little shameless promotion if I can now for your
Yes, please.
viewers,
Yes,
for your
yes.
audience. That this book that's just out now, Volume 5. It's over 500 pages, actually 520 pages. 108 devotees are interviewed in here, and over 700 stories. I'm giving all your viewers or people in part of your audience $10 off for the next week if you email me at that email address, and in the subject line type in LMP,
LMP.
late morning program,
Okay.
to know that I'll give you the $10 discount.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Prabhu. Appreciate it. So for all the listeners, please go ahead and get these books. Get the Prabhupada Memories. You can find them on YouTube on Siddhanta Prabhu's YouTube page. Let me show you the YouTube page here. So this is Prabhupada Memories on YouTube. You can subscribe to that. There are plenty of videos on here. Looks like more recent videos that you've just uploaded quite recently. But this is a wonderful YouTube page.
Let me point out one to you that's
Sure.
if you're going to watch one, I mean, there's 84. I haven't, just to let you know ahead of time, because I do have subscribers to the series, and they do pay a subscription kind of fee.
Right.
So I don't post the most recent ones, at least for maybe 6 months to a year, just to, for their benefit, that they're getting the special deal. They're seeing the new memories firsthand.
Yeah.
So I'm not, taking advantage of them, but you'll see on the, I don't know if it's left or right, top row, far right.
Yes.
You see, it says Bahulasva.
Bahulasva, yeah.
Yeah. So if you're to watch one, I mean, since I started this in 1991, there are obviously several or many now devotees, unfortunately, it's a fact of life, that have left their bodies.
I see.
Mulla Prakriti, Brahmananda, I could name them. This was an interview I did a year ago. November, I think it was on Lord Nrsingadev's disappearance day or appearance day, I can't remember. 6 days later, Bahulasva left his body.
Wow.
6 days after this interview. And it's a very meaningful and heart-wrenching interview. So if you're going to watch one, this might be the one to start with.
Wow. Wonderful.
Bahulasva was an early disciple of Prabhupada. And he left he left the movement for a while. I was not able to contact him for years. I couldn't find him. Finally, a devotee called me and said, Bahulasva wants to share his stories with you. So he lived up in Northern Cal. And so I finally called him and we talked and arranged a time for me to go up there. And his stories are incredible. And his love for Prabhupada has never left.
Amazing. This has been a fantastic interview. Have you actually done your Prabhupada Memories like in the same format that you do the interviews?
I'm a little camera shy.
Right.
But you're not the first one to ask me that. No, I haven't done that, but I have put my stories in the introduction to the books. So everything's there. As far as my first words I heard from Prabhupada, I feel no fear is there. There's a story that I tell in the book, but I can tell you now. I was on a morning walk with Prabhupada in Denver, Colorado. Prabhupada came for a week. He stayed with us for a week. He was attracted to come because we were I think second in the Sankirtan newsletter. We were second for a good period of time. Denver distributed more books than almost anybody except for maybe LA or the Radha Damodar Party. I can't remember who was number one.
Wow.
But that's how Prabhupada would come. He would come, he'd be attracted by the devotees' love, which was exhibited by distributing a lot of his books.
Yeah.
So we distributed a ton of books there, and he came. And Funny, before I tell you my story, Padmanabha, a good friend of mine, god brother, came up to Prabhupada during that time and said, Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, we're number 2. We're in Denver, we're a medium-sized temple, and we're number 2 in the world, Srila Prabhupada. And he was expecting Prabhupada to say, wow, that's great, or some, good, pat on the back kind of thing. And then, but Prabhupada told him, he said, well, you make it number 1.
Wow.
So he's always encouraging in that way.
Right.
But on one particular morning walk, Prabhupada was talking about prasadam and the benefit of prasadam. And actually, the same devotee, Padmanabha, was doing traveling Sankirtan, and he couldn't eat the heavy halava and the ghee and the sabji with the ghee in there. He would fall asleep, driving.
Right.
So he asked Prabhupada about what could he do. He said, well, do you like fruit? And he gave him alternatives, that you don't have to eat exactly what Krishna eats, if it's, not helping your service. Prabhupada's very practical. Very practical.
Yes.
Very compassionate, full of wisdom. But this morning, he was talking about how he could take prasadam, and if there was something that he needed to eat, of course, vegetarian, then they could offer, next to the maha in the kitchen as the offering was being made, and then it would be maha. But then he further discussed about the importance of prasadam, spiritual food offered to Krishna on the altar. And he said, and I was 2 feet from him. I always remember that. I mean, I heard him clearly, clear as a bell. And he was describing how there are 8,400,000 different species of life.
Yeah.
And even if an animal or any insect or any other living entity besides a human being somehow or another eats prasadam, in their next life, they will jump over all the other species and take a human form of life. This is the importance of prasadam. And I'll take a cue from one of my daughters who carries prasadam in her car, that when she comes to a stoplight, and now with the economy and the toilet, we're like back in the Depression era. There you will find bums, you will find good people, so many people in different situations of life. They'll be on this median asking for donations or whatever, and she'll hand them prasadam. So I'll do that also. You can offer a fruit, an apple, orange, and they'll accept it. And then you're helping them in their next life. And so Prabhupada also said that for a human being that eats prasadam, they'll take birth in a human form, of course, but it'll be an elevated form in a rich family or Brahmin's family, something in order to carry on their spiritual journey.
Right.
So very important. Prabhupada stressed prasadam all the time. Prabhupada was given a darshan with a lot of Indians, a lot of guests, and Kuladri had the service of handing out. He had a big jar of gulab jamans, and so that everyone, when they left, they would get maha, they would get prasadam. Yeah. That was customary. Every time Prabhupada was stressed prasadam so much, right? Mm-hmm. So this one day, as just before he gets up to distribute the prasadam as they're leaving, Kuladri sees that there's a bunch of ants on the gulab jamans, and thinking that, I can't distribute these, they're contaminated now. There are ants all over the place. Right. And he says to Prabhupada, there are ants all over the gulab jamans. And Prabhupada said, don't worry, they don't eat very much.
Right. Oh, beautiful.
So back to Prabhupada's humor. And wisdom, all in the same story.
Yeah. Prabhu, some concluding words from you to our viewers. I know, and our listeners, and I know I urge all the listeners to take up Prabhu's offer of getting, the Memories book from him, from that email address that I had earlier. Put LMP in the subject line so you can get $10 off. But some concluding words for us on from your years of wisdom and experience.
Oh boy, that's a whole Bhagavatam class in itself. Well, another shameless promotion. I mean, these videos, the technology is changing all the time. First, as you mentioned, there were VHS. Then we had DVDs. Now DVDs aren't being used anymore. So the videos you can see on YouTube, if you want them for your home use and you don't have access to a computer, I now have all the videos on a flash drive, a
Oh, wow.
512 gigabyte flash drive.
Wow.
And so you can plug it into your laptop. You could plug it into your iPhone or your Android phone. You could plug it into your smart TV, and you could
Right.
have programs at your home. You know, that's what we used to do when a new video would come out. I would have a premiere at our home, and it would be a potluck. We would call everybody, "Hey, there's a new memories videos out. We're having a premiere Saturday night.
Yeah.
Potluck, bring your best prasadam, your best offering." And so we would, I would have Bardraj come over, and he would lead a great kirtan. You know, he's one of the best. Love him.
Mm.
And then we would have a kirtan, and then we would have a feast of, everything that everyone brought. And then we would sit down for an hour and a half or so and watch, the premiere. Instead of watching a Netflix thing, you could watch all these stories and do it in the Association of Devotees. Hopefully, there'll come a time where you're not afraid to gather with fellow devotees and, get your vaccine or whatever. And
Right.
it'll
Right.
end. It'll come to an end, hopefully. But
Yes.
that premiere, so that could be done just on a flash drive now. That's how things are being distributed now.
Mm.
And you can also, because it is on a flash drive that you can see and hear on your phone, you can plug your phone into your car. You can plug that flash drive. Actually,
Yeah.
plug the flash drive, because cars now have a USB connector.
Correct. Yes. Yes.
So while you're driving, you can hear a story.
Wow.
You won't see them, and it's not good to see, your screen. You might be able to pull it up on, if you have a new car that you can, or the kids in the back can watch it. But, you can hear them where you go, and then you can share the stories that you heard with your buddies or your friends,
Amazing.
and the more you hear, the more you can tell the story, the more you'll remember it. The Shravanam Kirtanam Smaranam. And I found that the lesson that's contained within practically every one of these stories, the lesson is more easily remembered because there is a story attached to it, a
Right.
setting, a visual.
Right.
I took a course. I'm now qualified to teach English as a second language. And during the course, I was taught that teaching language or teaching anything, people are different in the way they absorb knowledge.
Yes.
Through their ears, through their eyes, through writing, through painting, through music, or through a story. So this is one easy way to remember a particular lesson through these anecdotes.
Wow.
That are meaningful. And then hopefully, we can remember Krishna and Prabhupada at the time of death. That's the essence there.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I mean, I don't know how much we are so in the comments. Actually, there's a lot of devotees expressing their gratitude for just taking the time out and taking the initiative to do this service, because it's extremely important and it's so valuable. And the fact that devotees didn't know that you were behind it makes it, your humility shows in that you didn't want to bring yourself forward, but you wanted to bring your God brothers forward. You wanted to bring Prabhupada forward and his leelas and everything. And I'm so happy that we got to do this so people can know who you are as a person, and the person behind the Prabhupada memories. And I think fantastic. I'm so grateful.
Well, thank you for that. Again, it's not me. I'm just a facilitator. Using, what does Rupa Goswami say? I think something in the Nectar Devotion that, the essence is that you take your propensity in life and use that for Krishna. That's what Prabhupada taught us. When Govinda Dasi first came, she was one of the earliest disciples, right? Her and Gaurasundar. They joined in Hawaii. The first thing Prabhupada asked, what do you like to do?
Mm.
That's how, we engage people. You don't, beat them over the head with, surrender today kind of thing, Prabhupada would always engage somebody just on a human platform, oh, what do you do? Where are you from? What do you like? And so she said, well, we're artists. I like to paint. So Prabhupada didn't say to her, go out on Harinam today. He said, okay, here's a picture. I'd like you to paint this.
Yeah.
So dovetailing, what our propensities are, what we like to do in the service of Krishna and Prabhupada is natural. And
Yes.
that will, make us happy.
Wonderful.
Prabhupada always wanted to make us happy. In that film that Yarabara and Vishaka did, Hare Krishna, the mantra, the meditation, the man that started it all.
Yes.
That was a thread that I remember seeing through it. Prabhupada's teachings, I want you to be happy.
Beautiful.
So how can we be happy in the material world? Well, we all have propensities. Some like to sing, some like to play music, some like to paint, some like to study, some like to whatever our propensities are that which our karma brings in this particular body, this lifetime.
Yeah.
You don't have to do it 24/7, but find something that you can do that will satisfy your heart, because that is what we're looking for. Bhakti yoga. Beautiful.
If someone wants to get in contact with you, I know you're on Facebook as Siddhanta Das, so I've just put that up on the screen. If someone wants to contact Siddhanta Prabhu or be his friend on Facebook, interact with him in any way, connect with him there on Facebook. So,
also, you could go to prabhupadamemories.com.
Oh, let me put that one on. prabhupadamemories.com. Okay, prabhupadamemories.com. Please go to that website. You can get in contact with Siddhanta Prabhu there as well. I'm sure you can see the book and all other things there as well. Great, wonderful. Siddhanta Prabhu, please stay on. I'm going to turn off the live, but thank you so much again. That was so wonderful. I really, really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure, and I acknowledge you for all that you do. And you have great guests on. Not if I can come up to 50% of what the other devotees that you've had on, and get across a little something about Prabhupada, then my day is a success.
Oh, you did.
You are also a facilitator, so you're doing a great job in what you're doing.
You're a role model of mine. This Prabhupada Memories thing, that's the beginning of this kind of interviewing, of devotees about Prabhupada and Krishna consciousness. So thanks for blazing that trail for me.
Well, you're a good listener, so you got the first quality to be a good interviewer. So
thank you.
I acknowledge you for that. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Appreciate it. Please stay on. So for all my listeners, that's episode 50 of the Late Morning Program. You can find this podcast on YouTube and Facebook. The audio only will be coming out on all popular podcasting platforms: Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, any kind of podcasting platform. You can hear it there as well. But thank you again, Siddhanta Prabhu. That's episode 50. Thanks to all my listeners. We will see you, I don't think next week. I think I'm paused next week for my son's birthday, but the week after we have another devotee coming on. I'll put it on the Facebook page. But thank you again. Hare Krishna, everyone, and have a great evening. Hare Bol. Oh, sorry, wrong one.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.